not anymore. But,
Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Peggy Apthorpe, and I am currently working as an AmeriCorps with Conservation Nebraska. We want to welcome you here this afternoon. We really appreciate your taking the time to be here. I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers for today. First we'll have Jeremy Bowers. Jeremy is the Director of Sustainability and Environmental Affairs at OPPD. In 2023, OPPD created a new business unit entirely focused on this priority for the Public Power District. In his role, Jeremy oversees a team of environmental professionals focused on both regulatory requirements and transformational initiatives. He is a professional civil engineer in the state of Nebraska and has been with OPPD since 2007. So he's going to start out with an update on what OPPD is doing in terms of sustainability. Our second speaker, Eric Williams, is a dedicated individual who has worked professionally for over a decade it might be longer because I got this online, but to preserve and protect natural resources in the Omaha community. He is currently working at the Papio, Missouri River National Resources District. He's a board member of OPPD. He is going to be talking about future kinds of things, what we're looking at for the future. And he has an electric car and he has solar on his residence. So those are two kind of interesting things. So I'll go ahead and turn the program over to Jeremy and we'll get started. But thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here. We had a really, I'll say, robust first session. We had a full room and a lot of good questions. So I'm happy to be able to talk with you today. As I get this queued up. No good. Okay. Well. Okay, good. I can just do that. This is different than the first session, so we'll learn about that. So you're going to see a preview of the next slide with every slide. So I don't know what changed between the first session and this session, but we're going to roll with it. So again, thank you for the invitation, Jeremy Bowers. Our director, actually my current title is Director of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs. Just as a sign of the times, we are in a transition, and we'll talk some about the new business unit, Sustainability and Environmental Affairs. We call it CBU affectionately. My title is going to be changing to include a sustainability function as well. As the introduction said, been at the district since 2007. I'm a local guy. I've been in Nebraska since I was 15. Went to Millard South High School. Went to Nebraska for my undergrad and grad school. So I've been in the area most of my life. I'll say it that way. And 17 years is a long time to be at a company. I get questioned about that. Like, you don't see that a lot anymore. And I personally said the last session, I said I think that's a little overplayed because I think people today value stability as much as they ever did. I think it kind of cuts both ways. That if an organization like offers and values and provides incentives and provides a stable place for somebody to have a sustainable future, if I can drop that in there, you'd see people stay places a lot longer. It is true though that you do see a lot more mobility. And so I get asked, why have I stayed at the same company that long? My answer is based in essentially the meaningfulness, the purposefulness of my work there. My father told me to find work that like gives you meaning and purpose every day. I don't like the saying that says, find something that you love to do and you won't work a day in your life. If anybody says that, they don't know what work is. Like, work isn't fun. You don't say, I'm going to get fun every day. You go to work every day. But you want that work to be meaningful, and you want that work to make a difference. My dad was a psychologist, and he found a lot of meaning in work and like healing and providing for families, reconciliation, just like the work that he did. And I can say I find similar meaning, not the same meaning, right? But it's why you're all here today. And it's why I've stayed at OPPD for 17 years. It's a very purposeful place to be, and we're doing a lot of important and purposeful work. Okay, so today we're going to cover, start with OPPD, who we are, why it matters, so why the public power model is important, and why that's important to sustainability. We'll look back, or we'll talk about the new sustainability business unit. So this was titled like a sustainability update from OPPD is what I was asked to talk about. So a lot of what's happened, the update in the last year, is around how organizationally, how we're focusing on sustainability in a different way. We'll look back briefly on the Pathways to Decarbonization initiative. That was a real, milestone initiative for us. I'll say it that way. It's not exactly the right word, but it's provided us direction. It's provided us a priority for decades to come, and so it does inform the work that we do today, which is a natural segue to how our generation portfolio is changing. So we'll talk about that both in the near term, I should say, not in just the big term, which is what Pathways to Decarbonization was about, but also in the real near term, how our generation portfolio is changing and how it's consistent with Pathways to Decarbonization. And then I'll close, if we have time, I will close with a few more comments about some of OPPD's vision for the future and the utility that we want to be and expect to be in the year 2050. So about OPPD, founded in 1946, that's when the state legislature created OPPD as a political subdivision of the state. You may not know that OPPD, or that Nebraska is the only all-public power state. And you should be really, really proud of that. Like, that affords you access, it affords you input into the way that your utility is governed. And I think there'll be more comments about governance here this afternoon than you would with a private utility. That's just a fact. That's part of our mandate. Stakeholder engagement and hearing what the community input on what OPPD's plans are is an important part of public power. It's why we do what we do. You can make the case it's why I'm here today. In addition to being involved in this space otherwise. So that's an important piece of our mission. That was 1965 when we expanded to our current size, 5,000 square miles, 13 counties. You see there we're the 12th largest public power utility in the U.S. Just for comparisons, some context for you, NPPD is the 35th largest as far as number of customers served, and LES is the 23rd largest. And OPPD is the largest in the state. So just a little bit about public power, the tenets that you often hear: local control, affordable, reliable, and you do see that show up in the way we're governed, and that is important to the sustainability conversation. We have an elected board, which is with us today, and we'll provide some comments today. And you're not governed by a corporate board that's thousands of miles away. I mean, we live here, we work here. I can still say that post-pandemic. There's people that work in different places, but we do live here, we do work here, we are controlled locally. And we have, open meetings requirements. We have all sorts of avenues for you to participate in public utility. And that shows up in our rates. We have currently the last data I saw when I was putting some notes together we're 31% lower on a rate standpoint, below those states with retail choice. That's from the US EIA. But it does mean a couple other things for us. We also have an obligation to serve, and that's going to be important when we talk about our growing load. We have a statutory obligation to serve, and then we also have to design our rates with a defendable cost of service calculation. Like, our rates have to be based on cost to serve that particular customer class. And so that comes up a lot when we're talking about block rate design or time of use rates. Those kind of conversations for us often comes back to our obligation to have rates that reflect actual cost of service. So ultimately, I'm really proud to work in a state that does have public power, because we treat power here, we treat it like it really is an essential life service, right? We treat it like it's water. We treat it like water is an essential service. Electricity is the same way, and our state governs it that way. So I'm proud to live here and work here. So you see our mission statement here on the left: affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive. And we'll talk a lot more about that. On the right, you see our legal and regulatory obligations. So obviously that's super high level. That's basically just all the levels of government. Yes, everything from EPA regulations, on the high end of like the federal side. Those are the things people usually think of first. They think of all the environmental rules that we have to pay attention to. Does the state state programs, delegated authorities at the state, delegated authorities at the city. Here in Omaha, the city of Omaha is our air regulator. But what you don't hear as much about, at least you didn't until a few years ago, most people didn't realize, all the reliability requirements and regulations that we have to meet that's governed by federal process, governed by FERC, and also requirements from NERC for reliability standards. SPP is our balancing authority, our regional transmission organization for this part of the country, and SPP implements those reliability standards. Most of you may not have heard of SPP until a few years ago when everybody heard of SPP and was an expert on SPP, when they thought that it was SPP's fault that we had our first experience with rolling blackouts here in the region was at, I think, in 2021. SPP provides tremendous value though. They help ensure reliability by spreading out the risk on one hand, and then they're obligated to calculate for the least cost solution. And so it does play a part in keeping our generation as affordable as possible. In the middle, you see our strategic directives. Strategic directives first came to OPPD in 2015, and they really set the framework between how our publicly elected board tells management the what, and then management goes off and has to do the how. And so you see those there in the middle, really important to us. And from somebody who's been at the utility for a long time, from an entry-level engineer position to my current position today, I find a lot of value in those because it's kind of black and white. This is what the strategic directive says to do. So that's really important when we look at the example that I wanted to share with you today on the next slide, which is one of the changes we made to Strategic Directive 7, which is on environmental stewardship. This was 2 changes ago, and this was to the preamble material, but this codified in our strategic directives that climate change is real and that human beings are having an impact and part of it. And so we have to operate our business with that, recognizing that that's the reality. And so it's not just like if you want to feel that way. I mean, it just kind of takes any politics out of it. It's just how we're governed. And so this is part of our Strategic Directive 7 is that we have obligations around that understanding. And so you see that on the next slide where I go through each of our strategic directives. So the top clause centered on our commitment to continuous improvement in our environmental performance. The next one is all around that watershed commitment to be net zero carbon by 2050. You see after that, focusing on going beyond compliance where we can, so obligations around environmental compliance. We're very committed as public power to transparency and stakeholder engagement around that. So a good example, if you participated in our decarbonization work, we had a pretty robust set of stakeholder meetings around that, and that wasn't just a check the box. Like that input really did get incorporated, and it got documented how that got incorporated. Engaging customers. Finally, I say finally, it used to be finally, you get to advocate and educate local, state, and federal governments to protect. It's kind of strange language, OPPD's environmental impact. That is to say that we will engage with those stakeholders to advance the environmental portions of our mission. And so that used to be the last clause. Now you see an additional clause, and this is a way for the board to you could say hold the CEO accountable, a way to require a status check or us to check in on our commitment to retire North Omaha units 4 and 5 off of coal by end of the year 2026, which means by end of year 2027 we would see the emission reductions that you document here, which is again to just reflect the fact that that's the emissions from North Omaha units 4 and 5 on coal roughly. And so the board then holds the CEO accountable for that, and we have to give a monitoring report every year talking about our progress. So to help support this important part of the mission, roughly 2 years ago it was announced, and then roughly about a year, we're about to have our sustainability. We're about to be 1 year old as a business unit on the 17th of April. Launched a brand new business unit with an executive level voice to make sure that this portion of our mission has as loud of a seat at the table as the other pieces of our mission. Not that they're in competition, but when the rubber meets the road, right? We have obligation to serve. We have to have the cheapest rates, and we have an obligation which is not new to OPPD, but our CEO saw there's a difference not having in a voice at the senior team that was their sole priority, and so now we do. Elevated, as you see, last April. One of the ways that's the value of that's bearing itself out is we are able to add some key talent. So in addition to the Vice President of Sustainability, we've added several sustainability positions. particularly one around data, sustainability analytics manager. So that's someone that's really focused on helping us get the data that we need to be able to target set and be able to make goals. Like you can't set a goal if you have no idea how much water you're using. You can't say I want to use this much water. You got to understand what your impact is before you can set goals around it. And then another one that we'll be adding an environmental justice specialist this year, but sustainable supply chain specialist is one that I'm excited to get for next year that will help us understand what impacts we could have in our Scope 3 space, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in the slides to come. So this is our current business unit scope. I won't spend too much time on this. This is out of our legacy environmental scope, so we're doing, most of that you see is we were a division in the public affairs business unit. We've added this sustainability program and the goal setting and the carbon counting and the pieces around that are really gonna help us propel us into the future for the goals that we've set and even setting those goals. So some of the first things that we're going to be focusing on. This is the next few years at OPPD for sustainability. But before we do that, I want to direct your attention maybe to the bottom of this slide where you see the UN Global Compact Sustainability Stages Model. So this is a way to describe an organization's investment in sustainability from just like we do it because we have to do a greenhouse gas disclosure requirement in the compliance space, all the way up to hey, this is why we're here. It's a really big part of our purpose, and on the purpose-driven side. Cliff, coming from an outsider's perspective, he's been with us about a year now. It was interesting to hear his outsider view of OPPD, and he describes it as a donut. We have a really solid compliance record. We have a staff that's expert at what they do, and we value as an organization very highly our compliance record. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a lot of 2050 goals, and we give TED Talks on the importance of some of these big initiatives that we have going on, and that's not just lip service. That's part of our everyday at OPPD. Is our purpose is public power and who we are. Purpose driven is really part of your daily experience at OPPD. Cliff would say we were maybe perhaps a little bit weak in the middle two, which is resource optimization and market differentiation. So, hey, if you run a business, then you really need to understand. You want to make some goal setting around water usage. You got to know what your water usage is, and so that's the resource optimization piece. And the market differentiation, maybe we can actually invest some in doing some cutting edge stuff around this because it is so important to us, because we are a purpose-driven organization, and find a way to do some things that other folks in public power aren't doing. So his observation, was it the stages model, we kind of have the two ends, he said, which has been unique in his experience. The other thing that I'll point you to is you see, just because they're coming out soon, we have this environmental playbook and sustainability playbook. This is our first step to actually implementing our standards across the district. I said we were really good at compliance. Well, that was because compliance is all about regulations and following the rules. Our sustainability playbook, for example, picking one, is going to be, hey, these are our standards. Outside of what the actual rules are, these are our standards, and we're going to audit the different parts of the organization against these standards. And so we're going to have plumbing fixture standards, and we're going to have the way green space is managed as habitat standards, and we're going to have those types of things in that document that then we'll measure our organization against. That we may only be 10% compliant with our sustainability playbook. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have goals. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a best practice that we're shooting for. I'll touch on a couple other things relevant to this conversation. In the sustainability kind of plans here in the near term, you'll see that we plan to publish not just an overall net zero carbon goal, but strategies and goal setting around scopes 1, 2, and 3. And you'll see that in the upcoming revisions to Strategic Directive 7, at least a recognition of goal setting around all 3 scopes and our impact there. And then I did already mention the playbooks. On the next slide, one of the things that we're standing up right now in the 2024 column is our green teams, which are probably not revolutionary to anybody in this room, but we are establishing kind of teams of the willing at each of our sites. And we've had a really strong response, actually, at the sites that we've stood these up at, that folks want to get involved because, if you tell like it's a continuous, OPPD's always had a continuous improvement mindset. And this is very similar to that space. We want to get better about our electricity, water, our fuel use, our diversion rates. But we recognize that has to happen as like hyper locally as it can to make the best impact. And so, starting with a team that is on the ground that wants to be engaged in this space and wants to give ideas on how to improve is a good first step. What we'll do is we'll take those process improvements and those ideas as common as they can be across the facilities and implement those into the sustainability playbook so that they become a standard. So the good ideas that get developed at a hyper-local level then can be more broadly enforced and implemented. And I'm sure some of those efforts will get highlighted in a sustainability report. I've said we're going to have one of those for a long time, and then we keep getting paused for various reasons. We do have a goal of publishing a sustainability report. We last published one, 10, 12, something like that years ago, which was mainly focused on our generation portfolio and like what the new cool things we were doing with wind. And it was all around our generation resources at the time. We have goals and aims to publish another sustainability report. We went through, if you're familiar with kind of the space, like a materiality assessment, a priorities assessment for OPPD. For us, sustainability as a public power organization, for us, sustainability means how can we ensure that we provide value in the future as a public power organization. And so it's important that we have sustainability reporting will include carbon accounting, it'll include our greenhouse gas emissions. Yes, it'll include environmental performance. It'll also include DEI, it'll include energy affordability, risk management, all the other pieces that are important to make sure that we're still here in 2050, providing that value as public power, and that we can maintain that for the state of Nebraska. And then just Jeremy speaking, I think there's value. When I go to like EPRI conferences with other folks in this space, and they may or may not be public power, but when they're not public power, most of them have disclosure requirements, or they participate in like a disclosure framework. So they may be participating in the Climate Disclosure Project, the CDP, or GRI, or Just Capital, or one of the other sustainability disclosure projects. I think there'd be value in that. That's just me speaking. I don't know if I should say that or not, but I think there's value in that, and the day may come where we participate. So, as I mentioned before, we had and you're probably very well aware, we have Pathways to Decarbonization Initiative in 2019 is when we kicked that off. And it's still very impactful to our work every day. We're going to talk about our growth coming out as we continue to, iterate again and on new load growth that we're having and on what the latest technology maturation is. We always go back and make sure, like as an organization, is this consistent with the work that was done with the Pathways to Decarbonization project? Because that evaluated a variety of futures, found the common actions that we could take, and so judging any future actions we take against that output has been really important, and that's been how we've used it. This study did include a community and a customer impact, and those have been operationalized in our customer business unit on the way we evaluate product offerings. But it's no secret, our OPPD's largest impact is, of course, our emissions, our Scope 1 emissions from our generating fleet. And so we'll just spend a second on that. Low carbon electricity is vital to economy-wide decarbonization. Like we are, don't get me wrong, there's the transportation sector is huge too, but the scale here, when you look at this image, 2 to 5 kilowatts at the home, and then you look, as a representation at least of our grid here. We have 2.5 gigawatts of generating capacity roughly. This would be the wrong place to say that little actions don't matter, but the challenge and the goals that we have around our fleet are at a different scale and get talked about as such. I thought for today it might be useful to look back at the key findings from that report, especially in the context of our load growth that we're experiencing. So I'll give you a second to look at those. Probably the headline there is, it's not surprising that by 2050 we have need a significant investment in renewable resources. 3 to 5 gigawatts of solar, 4 to 6 gigawatts of wind, energy storage, dispatchable, yes, dispatchable low carbon assets as well. Because if you see several of those findings center around the growing challenge to reliability and the need for firm generation to ensure resource adequacy as renewables are integrated to the grid. That's the reality that we're facing because the grid is changing. And that's a good thing. That's what we all want. That's what we're all fighting for. But it is changing here. Preaching to the choir, and definitely not going to hit my 30-minute shot. So I'm going to do my best here. So Nebraska's fourth for wind potential. If you didn't know that, I would ask you how long you've been here, because it does not take you long to realize Nebraska is very windy. And that shows up as we think about resources. 13th for solar potential in the U.S. I think a couple things is public power that we think about these as we think about integration of the grid. There's a million things, but from the sustainability guy, right? Like we will have a lot larger impact on a lot more land in the future. Right? These resources take up a lot more land. Wind takes up 1.5 acres for a 2 megawatt turbine, but the total use is about 64 acres per megawatt. Now you can have other uses of that land, so that I don't want to mischaracterize it. But we will, like if we were going to own a wind farm and not just purchase the wind, we would own a lot more land than we've historically owned. Solar is a lot more dense, 5 acres a megawatt or so. But you can't, at least in most cases now, with the height and the way that they track, it's hard to use that land for other purposes. I think there's a future there, but it's hard. Important to know that wind and solar each provide something very different to the grid. And they're not the same. Renewables are not, a renewable isn't a renewable isn't a renewable. They provide different things. As you think about wind's most available in the winter and the springs, right? Evenings and nights. Wind is least available in the summer, midday. Solar is most available during the day, naturally. There's not sunny at night, sorry, headline there. But it's least available in the winter. In fact, we talked about the regulatory requirements. We get 0 capacity credit for having solar in the winter, like none. So if we had 1,000 megawatts of solar, we would still be obligated to put in an amount of dispatchable resources, or accredited resources, I should say, to be able to meet our legal requirements. We get 0 credit for solar in the winter. So with Nebraska's high wind potential, it's no surprise that we have a lot of solar here, or a lot of wind here. I'll skip through that. Our grid is changing. This is kind of the way things have changed over the last 10 years or so. I won't go. We have had a lot of resiliency issues here over the last few years. That's not, if you live here, you're aware of those. They're caused by different things. Every event's different. That's why it's important to have a diverse portfolio as the grid transitions. I read in a newspaper. People still read newspapers. Can I still say that? I read somewhere. Somebody blamed the event that we had this spring on the wind, which doesn't make much sense. This event in the spring that we had was, if you're even aware that we had a challenge over the winter here, it was caused by low river levels in the Missouri River because of the drought. And then subsequent to that, an ice jam formed. It's the second year in a row we've had a bad ice jam on the Missouri River after not having one since the 80s. That was caused by low river level, and so all the generating assets, most of the generating assets along the Missouri River for a big stretch, not just OPPD's assets, but others had to be taken offline. And the grid, very fortunately then, was supported by a significant amount of wind, both within internal to OPPD, internal to SPP, but also importing from the east. Similar, or kind of the opposite of that. We had an event, winter before that, or 2 before that, where we had the long duration, hard, cold, like sub-zero temperatures, and it wasn't just for a few hours, it was for like a week, and there was no wind. And so it was the opposite issue. And so right now, as the grid transitions, having a good diversity of generation is important. To that end, we do have new generation coming online. We have natural gas facilities should be online this year, and Platteview Solar, which I'll talk about on the next slide, should be up hopefully next month, I believe, is the current timeline. You may ask why you're talking about new natural gas generation at a sustainability summit. Well, it's important, that reliability and resiliency, especially as events become more severe because of climate change like that. Having a focus on our resiliency as we work for carbon mitigation is an important part of our job. Platteview Solar scheduled to be operational here in May, so that's close to UTAN. I'll try to move on. That's about 80 megawatts coming online there. Here's over time, our percent of retail sales. The main thing I want you to take away from this is that a percent of retail sales is not perhaps the best way to look at, or perhaps not the best metric to use. You see in the back the shading, the way that our generation has been added over time. That's a thing that we can control. Well, we can work towards controlling it. We can add generation as fast as we can try to add it, but you'll still see fluctuations based off the weather, based off what other units you're doing online, based off load itself and how load fluctuates. Also note that we are starting to sell renewable energy credits this year within our footprint associated with the renewable assets. And so going forward, this would not be the best way for an individual who maybe is working on a greenhouse gas inventory to an end user to calculate their scope 2 emissions. This would be an inappropriate way to look at that. And so there's a lot of reasons why it's not the best metric, but it's certainly illustrative of the progress that we've made over time. So that's the activities. This is kind of the outcomes we have seen of reduced emissions year over year. That's obviously due to the step change of the North Omaha units coming offline. It's also due to the way that the units get dispatched and capacity factors as the grid is changing itself. But that's a 30% reduction in our Scope 1 emissions. And important to note, we expect both direct emissions and intensity to continue to go down despite the growth that we're seeing. Here's our comprehensive inventory. And again, for time, I'm going to go quick through that. I just want to emphasize here that just because the lion's share of our emissions is in our Scope 1, because we're a utility, that we're really trying to preach internal the fact that we shouldn't let that wash out the rest of our impact. And so we'll probably be doing some goal setting, taking out our direct emissions from our generation facility and say, okay, let's pretend like we were an accounting firm, like where can we do better? And so we'll see some goal setting around Scope 2 and 3 into the future. The customer side, again, is an important piece of every generation plan. The main thing, I had a lot of notes on this, but I'm going to say what I want you to take from this is that demand response is a really important piece of our plan, because it's like avoiding the capital of a power plant. It's something that we can actually pull a trigger on. You could use the word dispatchable. These programs allow us to reduce demand on the system. We have 191 megawatts of that. Energy efficiency, not exactly the same thing, but we can calculate a carbon savings of these customer programs. But you need to hear about the growth that we're having. Hopefully you've already heard of that. Hopefully this isn't the first time you've heard about it, because this year we're going to really be pivoting from the work that we've been all our heads down focused on is the new Power with Purpose assets. Those will be coming online, and we'll immediately transition to the work that's needed to support the transformational growth that we're seeing. Yeah, you're reading that right. We have to double our infrastructure in the next 10 years. So it took us 75 years to have the demand that we have today, and we have to double that capacity in the next 10 years. And that's not, some people say, oh, it's that guy or that industry. It's across all classes. We are seeing that across the board. Yeah, there is impact from all the industry that is moving into our area, but it is not solely that. We haven't experienced that kind of growth and demand since the 70s, when air conditioning really penetrated, when everybody had that air conditioning, and I'm thankful for that. But we have not seen that kind of growth since then. So a little more on the reasons for that. So we talked about the load growth. I'll leave that there. We were seeing a couple other changing requirements as well. So the regulatory requirements, we're now having to solve for a winter peak as well as a summer peak. In the past, we had capacity requirements around a summer peak. Now we're going to have requirements around a winter peak. The other key that's changing is the it's on there somewhere, I think. Yeah, is the amount that we have to have. So our planning reserve margin that we have to have over the. So traditionally, if you have to be able to serve your own load, and the rules say you have to be able to serve a certain percentage above that. So I think that's traditionally been 12%. That is going up substantially, which essentially is the same as load growth. Like it's a law that we have to follow that we'll have to continue to comply with. And those three factors combined, so the load growth, the winter peak, and how winter load is changing, and then add on to that the new planning reserve margin creates this future of additional load. This is how we're solving for that. This is just in the beginning phases, right, of the planning for this work, but we have to move very quickly because we're seeing that load growth happen, as that previous chart showed, in the next few years in a really accelerated pace. One thing that it's hard to perhaps wrap your mind around sometimes is that the difference between capacity and energy. So a lot of our rules are written around capacity because you have to have the capacity, otherwise the lights go out when it's negative 10 degrees outside, and I shouldn't say lights, right? The heat. I mean, depending on your house, home is heated, but it's pretty important you not lose power when it's negative 10 outside. Capacity is important, but you can supply the vast majority of the energy using other resources, and we expect the challenge is getting the renewables built. But we expect the plan is that 90% of the new load is going to be served by non-carbon based resources on an energy standpoint. And that is how we have to meet our obligation to serve. We have to meet our resiliency requirements, and then we're solving for this, accelerated reduction of emissions. All right, so K-Junction Solar, that's where we're working right now on our next big solar facility, if you're not aware of that, in York County, 310 megawatts. I say working on it, we're not building it yet. It's in the study phase, working on zoning regulations, so we're doing a lot of outreach in that area. I'm trying to get zoning regulations in place and reasonable zoning regulations in place. If you're interested in that, it's a topic I would imagine many of you are. To be able to have renewables here in Nebraska, we need to have good zoning laws. And zoning laws are important, right? They protect a property owner. We are all glad that zoning laws exist, but we got to make sure that they can help facilitate building renewables in the state. So we're working on that right now. I don't think the final zoning rules have been approved yet. I think that's kind of a real contemporary issue. All right, I think I'm going to stop there. The only thing I have left that I wanted to go through was this Illuminate Our Future, which is our long-range planning effort around 2050. I'd encourage you to go to our Community Connect website. We have this 2050 vision that does include, and it was a planning exercise across a lot of different futures where we said, what's kind of the most important thing for us to still be providing the value that we want in 2050? One of those pillars is Cleaner World, which has the goal of having every choice lead to a cleaner world. And that sounds really high in the sky. High in the sky? Yeah, it sounds really high. But what you get from that, if you go to that website, is that there's some real practical, reasonable milestones that we have published out there for 2030, 2040, and 2050. Things around how much customers have adopted like an environmental product or program, and how much, what decile in industry are we for water use. Like we've got some markers. That's not a planning document, it's a vision document, but it'll give you some insight into the way OPPD is thinking about the future. So thank you for the time. Sorry I went over, but I think Director Williams, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks very much. We're going to do a quick tech-based transfer here. We're going to see how this works, I hope. Okay. Push buttons? No. Did anybody in the room set up the tech for this presentation? No? Okay.
Yeah, I think if you switch browsers, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll talk while I do this. My name is Eric Williams. I'm on the Board of Directors of Omaha Public Power District. I was elected in 2018. There we go. I represent Subdivision 6 in Northeast Omaha. And let me show you where I hope. Yeah, the sound, that's good. More sound, okay. And, all right. Perfect, there we go. I represent Subdivision 6 in Northeast Omaha, and I'm glad to be here to talk with you all about how the policy work and the governance at OPPD helps achieve the outcomes that our customer owners have asked us for, and that began with including environmental sensitivity into our mission in about 2015, at the same time as these strategic directives were developed, and then continuing to update those policies to plan for the future to help us get to and through the clean energy transition that we know is already happening and will continue to accelerate. So as an organizational structure standpoint, the Board of Directors is the ultimate accountable oversight for the Public Power District. There are 8 of us. We oversee exactly one person, the CEO. The CEO then hires an executive leadership team. So there's about 10 of them. It's kind of an hourglass structure. 8 directors, 1 CEO, executive leadership team, and then about 2,000 employees across OPPD right now. That number is an estimate because it keeps going up. As we are growing, we need more people to help us develop and move forward on the plans and to implement the projects that we've been working on. Our current CEO is Javier Fernandez. He began in June of 2021. And his very first week was that giant storm with all the wind that took out power for about 200,000 people. So he got a very strong test as soon as he began, and we think he did great. The board has been very happy with his service. We're glad to have him leading the organization, as well as the executive leadership team that he has built since he's been the CEO. This map, very popular in presentations, so I've got a copy of it as well. This is from the annual report. We have this on our website. It's mostly about the financial aspects of OPPD. For order of magnitude, OPPD's annual budget is about $2 billion. And it's broken down to our operations as well as our capital projects, and then other planning activities. And so just again, for order of magnitude, about $2 billion in annual revenue and expenses. 5,000 square miles, so although our population is growing and our resources are growing, one thing is remaining the same, the land area, which is good. From a governance perspective, the board provides direction to the organization through strategic directives, as Jeremy pointed out. Those were developed in 2015, and strategic directive number 1 is the strategic foundation of the organization, which highlights our mission, vision, and values. And those reflect what the customer owners in our territory have told us they want their public utility to be. And the good news is that by electing members of the board of directors, you are sending a message to the utility. I want this person to represent me, and I want them to help lead the organization to achieve what we want as a community in the future. And Jeremy said that public power with that public accountability is important. I very strongly agree. Nebraska is the only all public power state in the country. So there is only one public power utility in every jurisdiction, and there is public accountable oversight on the organization. In OPPD, it is the eight members of the board of directors. Again, I am very strongly supportive of the way that public power operates in Nebraska, and I think it's a real benefit. I hope you do as well. There are some who don't support public power quite as much, and so there may be a time in the future when you are asked if you support public power, and I hope you say yes. We talked a little bit about the strategic directives. That's one of the sets of policies that govern the organization. The other 2 don't get as much public presentation because they are mostly internal. They are governance policies and board staff linkages, meaning how the board of directors and the CEO and the executives and the staff work together. And so they don't involve the public nearly as much, but they are in the same policy binder. This presentation will be available later, so I've tried to provide links to everything if you want to review any of these documents. But the strategic directives are where most of the policies that most of the public are usually interested in. That's where you can find that information. Similar information to what Jeremy presented. In preparing for the future, we've taken several steps in the past. The update to Strategic Directive 7 about the net zero by 2050 objective, that was approved in 2019. And that was kind of on the order of time with other utilities, all generally moving in the same direction, and other businesses and state and federal policies also aligning around the idea of net zero by 2050. This is based on the best available climate science, which was reaffirmed by a Strategic Directive 7 update in 2021, as Jeremy pointed out. that we understand the reasons for taking action on decarbonization because of the scientific consensus on climate change. At the same time, the same month actually, the board approved Power with Purpose, and that was 2 new gas facilities, Turtle Creek and Standing Bear, and up to 600 megawatts of solar, and Platteview Solar is the project that came from that approval. So again, that was a way for us to prepare for lowering emissions and bringing more clean energy online in the future. That also enabled us to move forward on the final steps of refueling units 4 and 5 from coal to gas, and retiring units 1, 2, and 3 at North Omaha Station. And let me check, is anybody in the room interested in and have feelings about North Omaha Station? Raise your hand. Okay, I kind of thought so. That has been a point of interest for many years. The first time there was a discussion about the retirement of the coal units at North Omaha Station, or the first announcement by the board, was in 2016. There was another major action in 2019 to approve the resources that would allow us to carry that out. There was one more additional action in 2022. Based on things that are outside of OPPD's control, we needed to extend the timeline from 2023 until 2026, but we are on schedule now, and if you have any questions about North Omaha Station, that link on our Community Connect page will highlight the specific actions that are being taken now to achieve the closure of units 1, 2, and 3, and refueling of 4 and 5 on the schedule that has been set in the strategic directives and is being carried out by the executives and staff at OPPD. I am particularly focused on North Omaha Station because I represent Subdivision 6, where that station is located, and there are some very serious environmental and economic justice implications from a coal facility located in a low and moderate income and primarily black part of Omaha. And so it is our responsibility to live up to the promises we've made to the community, to see the closure and refueling of North Omaha Station, and I intend to continue to review monitoring reports and consider our policies aligned with that outcome that we have reaffirmed several times now. So I really look forward to when that will be accomplished by 2026 and then reported by 2027. A past step toward the future was our Bright Battery project. This is a 1 megawatt battery, so that is on the scale of a utility type project. It's located at a substation. There's information about that. I mention that because that was our first large battery that will point toward more energy storage in the future. So from installing this project, we will learn about how energy storage interacts with the grid and how we can move to more energy storage in the future. And that is already in process, and we'll talk about it a little bit more here in a second. Jeremy highlighted Powering the Future to 2050. This is a vision document. It was not a board approval action item per se. It is a set of ideals that we want to see achieved by 2050, and it is being updated. So if you pull up the document online, you'll see on the cover that it does reflect, I think the most recent update was November 2023. So as more information becomes available, and we update the way in which the organization views ourselves and how we're going to get to what the community wants to see from us. So it's an interesting document. The 6 major ideals or values that are represented there are the outcome of a lot of work from staff and the board on what do we think the future utility needs to be for our community. So I'd recommend you check this out. And there has been some confusion in the past. So if you see kind of an orange and purple branding, maybe on billboards or other places around, it says illuminate our future. That is OPPD, that is not the Illuminarium. Not the Illuminarium, that is OPPD. And there has been some back and forth because this document had been in plan for quite a while and it came out about the same time the Illuminarium opened. And so we had just a strange number of people saying, yeah, is that Illuminarium thing? No, that is OPPD's plan for how to be the utility of the future. Echoing what was presented earlier, OPPD will roughly double from about 2020 to 2032. And that is an incredible task, but I believe that our executives and staff are up to the challenge. Glad to have great people working on it every day. This near-term generation approval was an example of the way in which public oversight and accountability to the public power district came to the front of everyone's mind. The initial near-term generation recommendation was presented in May, and we received a lot of feedback because we had approved new resources in 2019, and it was presented as a lot of solar, with some gas backup for peaking and balancing. But by 2023, the gas units were moving forward, and we hadn't moved as effectively or as quickly on the solar. And we received a lot of feedback that it was important to people in our community that when we say we're developing clean energy, we want accountability on seeing clean energy coming online. And so in June, the board asked staff, give us a little bit more time before we approve this, make some recommendations about policy updates that will provide accountability on the timeline for deploying that renewable energy. In August, there was the same recommendation for the same resources, but with an additional revision to Strategic Directive 9 that sets specific outcomes for resources and the dates by which they would be accomplished. And so this is clipped out of Strategic Directive 9, and it reflects the timeline by when the board and the people we represent want to see new resources coming online. And this is more specific than we have seen in board policy in the past. And again, I bring this up as a mechanism of success of public power because we want to know that when we say we're developing clean energy and clean energy is going to be coming online, this is the accountability right here. It's in the policy binder, it's got quantities of renewable energy, it's got dates, and we want to know that that's actually what's going to be happening. And so when the board does our annual review of strategic directive monitoring reports, we do one each year on Strategic Directive 9, and by the end of 2024, when we do the Strategic Directive 9 monitoring report review, we'll decide, are we in line with contracting 200 megawatts of new renewable energy? And if not, the board would say that we are not aligned with the outcomes from that policy, and we need to continue to improve. And so this is, again, a mechanism of accountability on achieving what people ask the board and the organization to do. And I think it was a good demonstration of how public power is responsive to the people in our community. February was a particularly interesting month for innovation and transformation. So if you go to the website, another benefit of public power, all of our meeting minutes and the presentations from the board meetings are available online. We talked about the Renewable Energy Credit Trading Program. That's new and under development right now, and that allows generally larger customers who want to secure 100% renewable energy for the energy they consume. They can purchase credits to verify that they have clean energy for all of their use. That program is based on programs developed in other locations, and OPPD has got ours moving forward now, and we'll hear more about it in the future. We also talked about an integrated distribution plan, and these are kind of technical words, but this is a planning effort focused on the end of the line where customers engage with the utility. So this is how we will prepare for massive electrification of our transportation system through electric vehicles, of our homes and businesses through heat pumps and induction stoves and other electrified clean energy devices, and everything that we anticipate pushing up the demand for electricity in the future. The distribution plan is at the end of the wire. It's different than our resource and generation plan. And so I'm very glad that we are moving forward with this type of a planning activity to make sure we know how we will engage with our customers in the future. Advanced Metering Infrastructure, or AMI, again, sounds pretty technical, but I guarantee you'll hear more about it because we are deploying new meters that will enable new cool things for all of our customers. The first meters are anticipated to be showing up in 2025, and then 26, 27, we'll be replacing all of the meters in our entire service territory. It's on the order of about 400,000 meters for all of our customers, so it's going to take a little while to get them all replaced, but they allow a lot more interactivity with the grid from people who want to do things like timed charging for their electric vehicles, or using batteries at their home, or receiving credit for the value of solar when it's shining on the panels on their roof. All of those things are enabled by AMI. And then in February, we also received an update on the gas and solar projects that are in process and some transmission work that's going on. So again, I put this in here because if you go back later, you can find a lot of really good information from the February committee meeting on all of this great innovation and transformation that's ongoing at the utility. From a governance and policy perspective, we have other work that will be moving forward in the future. We've mentioned several times in our meetings that Strategic Directive 7 is currently being discussed in the Systems Committee, and we anticipate an update that will provide additional clarity on metrics for emissions reduction. Right now, what we have is the net zero carbon goal, which was approved in 2019. So that was the first point. And the second point in that line is 0 at 2050. But there's only 2 points. And there's not really any clarity in between on what do we expect or what would the board like to see as the outcome for emissions between 2019 and 2050. And that has led to some complicated discussions between the board and the executives and the staff about what are we supposed to be doing as we go toward 2050. So we anticipate a policy update that will clarify what outcomes the board wants to see, and then staff will provide how we're going to get there. That's that balance of responsibility that Jeremy highlighted earlier. The board sets what outcomes, the staff delivers how we will get there. So I think there'll be discussions about that and public input sessions probably over this summer. So stay tuned for an update about when we are looking for public input on Strategic Directive 7 on emissions reduction. From that AMI report on the last slide in February, we will be, over the next year or 2 or 3, talking about what kinds of cool things are now enabled because we have AMI available. And so that will be a policy discussion. How will we change our rate structure to encourage conservation and clean energy based on this new hardware? We are having ongoing discussions with other public agencies. K-Junction right now, the next most important step is that York County consider zoning that is compatible with the utility scale solar project. And they are in the process of doing that right now. Otoe County is also in the process of reviewing their solar zoning requirements. And so a lot of counties are looking at how do they want clean energy in their community and what types of balance of benefits and challenges do they want to see through their zoning in those local communities. So OPPD will be engaging a lot more with communities across the state in the future. How will we encourage beneficial electrification without just making it cheap to consume lots of energy indiscriminately? That is a very complicated task. Again, I would refer back to AMI is really going to help there. But we want to encourage electricity when it can reduce other fossil fuel use. We don't just want people to turn down their air conditioners and consume energy because it's cheap. We want beneficial electrification, not just lots of consumption. Those are different. We've talked about it at board meetings often. And I would encourage you to watch for policy discussions about the difference between the two in the future. And then lastly, is there anything else that the customer owners or business or industrial customers in our territory want from their public utility? If so, you should get in touch with the board. There's a board contact form online. I should have put it on this page, dang it. But Google OPPD board contact form, you'll find it. And reach out with any ideas about how you would like to see the utility move forward, either in these areas, on some of the subjects on the OPPD Community Connect page, or on any other topics that are most important to you. I'm going to try and click on something here. We'll see what happens. Fun with technology. Let's see. Brilliant. This is the price contour map. And this is basically just at the end because it's fun. This is what the Southwest Power Pool looks like. And this is a live to the 5 minutes view of the grid and the prices on the grid. So right now, what this is saying, purple, you can tell is the very bottom, off the bottom of the scale. What this says to me is people aren't using very much energy because it's not very hot or very cold, and there's a lot of wind blowing. And so right now, the grid prices are very, very low. There's a lot of abundant, clean, cheap energy on the grid. It's below -10. So there are negative prices in the power pool right now, meaning if we had batteries, we should be charging them right now. If we had electric vehicles that had time charging, we should be charging those batteries right now. If we had energy uses that were flexible, we should turn them on right now because there's a lot of very cheap, very clean energy on the grid right now. And this is a fun website. If you want to just poke around a little bit, you can see the transmission lines. It's just a good view of what the Southwest Power Pool looks like overall. And let's see. There's one more I wanted to click on because the SPP provides their own price contour map, which is interesting, but external companies are able to grab that data and do cool things with it. So this is another company that has grabbed the data from SPP and done even more interesting things. Like right now, you can see the live percentage of energy on the grid. 60% of all the energy is from wind. Here's a breakdown by gigawatts and percentage. Here is the LMP, the locational marginal price. And you can see that the price has been below zero all day. And this is a very foreseeable thing. And so this is just representing we have a lot of cheap clean energy available, and currently we don't have policy or products or other ways to take advantage of it. This looks like a massive opportunity to me. And so this is the type of thing that we're planning for in the future. When prices are below zero, that is a very weird scenario. We should be doing something good with this energy. We should be putting it into batteries or into electrofuels or into industrial processes. And this is an unusual time of year. This doesn't happen very often. It happens in the spring and in the fall. But it is, coincidentally today, it is a very, very low price day. This is a reflection of when this is happening, basically at night. This is midnight. And so each night this week, there's been a lot of wind blowing, a lot of clean energy, so much that the price isn't just negative. We've had to turn off 7,000 megawatts of wind energy because we have too much clean energy on the grid. And that is a weird problem to have. It doesn't happen all the time, but we are in a period right now where there's too much clean energy and we are literally just turning off some of it because we don't have anywhere to put it yet. That's why those distribution planning things are so important, because if we had all those electric vehicles ready to charge at 10 o'clock or midnight or 2 a.m. or 4 a.m., we could be soaking up all this clean energy and replacing fossil fuels that were in internal combustion engines with very cheap, very clean electricity. And the last part on this page I wanted to show you, there's a graph showing wind energy over today, yesterday, the last 30 days, and then there's a graph for solar. Wind, you can see here, the number for wind at the top, 23.8, so about 24 gigawatts. So we're between 14 and 28 gigawatts the last couple of days. This is solar, and the number there, maybe you can tell, the first number there is 0, because the solar that's deployed in SPP right now is 0 gigawatts, or 500 megawatts. Across all of SPP, that entire giant area, there is 500 megawatts of solar. And for comparison, Platteview Solar will be 80 megawatts. So when it comes online in maybe a week or two, it will be something like a 20% increase in all of the solar that is online in all of the 13 states in SPP. What do people think that means? Do we have enough solar?
No.
No, we do not have enough solar. Should we have more solar? Yes, we should have more solar. Okay. This is not a trick question. We have a lot of wind. We have a lot of wind energy in SPP. This happens a lot. We do not have very much solar. And so that's why OPPD is working on Platteview currently. It will come online again by May 1st. And that's why we're working on K-Junction. 300 megawatts at K-Junction, bordering on double all of the solar in all of SPP. And that's why the board authorized 1,000 to 1,500 megawatts of additional new renewable energy, because solar is inexpensive, it is available, and it provides a lot of benefit to the power pool and to the utilities that we currently haven't yet figured out how to recognize. So we need to be taking advantage of these very cheap, very clean resources. And I think that OPPD's policy work in the past has put us in a place where we will be able to do that in the future. So with that, we're a little bit over time. If anybody has any questions you want to shout out, go ahead. Otherwise, I think there's a break, and then we've got a bigger session upstairs.
Who you got building all them solar plants?
Nebraska, as a public power state, public utilities did not have access to the tax credits for a long time, so we've used what's called power purchase agreements, meaning a private developer builds the project, they own, operate, and maintain it, and we buy the capacity and the energy from the project. So then the private developer is building it. Moving forward, the Inflation Reduction Act enabled public power districts to have direct pay of the tax incentives. So we are evaluating, will OPPD build those projects directly? And if so, what does that mean? So the change in federal policy over the last year and a half has been very important to the consideration of how will we build renewable energy projects in the future. And I think we will probably see different models that are not just PPAs, but other models of how we build, own, and operate and maintain facilities in the future. Does that answer your question?
Well, that's quite a bit of stuff there. The other question is, you gonna have enough natural gas for the power plant up there if they convert it over?
At North Omaha?
Yeah.
Yes. The units get bigger from 1 to 5 at North Omaha. The reason that we are retiring 1, 2, and 3 when 4 and 5 go to gas is that the gas pipe to North Omaha is big enough for 4 and 5, but it is not big enough to also run units 1, 2, or 3 while 4 and 5 are running. So yes, we will have the gas necessary for units 4 and 5, but we would not have additional gas for any of the older units. That's why they're being retired, and we are looking at adding battery storage at North Omaha Station to use some of that grid connection that exists, because you can put more energy on the grid, but we don't have any way to get clean energy out of that facility other than the 2 gas units and possibly in the future energy storage. Any other brief questions? Sorry, Peggy, I hope that's all right.
So we will need to double the amount of infrastructure in 10 years. And one of the reasons was because of the industrial class. Does that include like the new Amazon and Google facilities? Are those considered industrial classes?
Yes, for a rough order of magnitude, we have about 350,000 residential customers. We have about 15,000 commercial customers, and we have about 150 industrial customers. That's order of magnitude. So there are not very many industrial customers. To be an industrial customer, like, I can't remember exactly how it works, but Creighton campus would be like 1 industrial customer. I think that it works a little bit different than that, but that is an example of how big you need to be to make it into the industrial class. So we have about 150 industrial class customers. So yes, an Amazon warehouse or a data center or Cargill, those are industrial customers. And they are growing a lot. They are all growing, both the manufacturing facilities and the data centers and everybody. We are also seeing growth in the commercial and the residential class as well. But you're right, the industrial class is growing the most. Last one. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, in terms of code and zoning codes, so we have these businesses come in and they're gonna do all of this for economy, but at the same time, it impacts you greatly. So you have this goal of, 2040, and you're gonna reduce your use by, let's say, half. But they come in and they increase it double what we are now. So do you end up at no change in your output? Can you fix that just through renewable resources?
To the last question, yes. Yes, we can through through renewables and the balancing or peaking gas facilities that are under construction. Yes, we are measuring 2 different things: the total carbon emissions that we want to be going down, but also carbon emission intensity. And that's important because we are seeing a huge amount of load growth. And so as we bring renewables online, it can help meet that load growth even while we push the total emissions down. And so that's why we are anticipating an update that will include both of those numbers in Strategic Directive 7 in the future. We, OPPD, cannot independently achieve what you're talking about. We need help from businesses who want to choose to electrify. We need help from cities and counties who have planning and zoning authority to move toward incentives for electrification. For example, new residential developments could be all electric. The technology exists. Insulation, heat pumps, that would absolutely serve those customers. It would be cheaper, cleaner, easier, healthier for those customers. But there aren't really any incentives to move in that direction yet. So I hope, I'll speak for myself, I hope the Climate Action Plan from the City of Omaha and the State of Nebraska encourage electrification of new energy consumption so that we can use clean energy to meet those needs rather than having them buy fossil fuels and then basically lock in future emissions. We want beneficial electrification. And this is happening even without any specific policies in place as far as I understand. I've talked to 4 different developers who have built multifamily residential facilities in Omaha on the order of 100 to 200 apartment units, and they have been all electric. And they all said, well, we just thought that was the right thing to do. And I said, yeah, but why? And they said, well, it wasn't because of climate, and it wasn't because of, I don't know. And so it keeps happening, and I really need to know, why are multifamily developers building all electric units right now, and what can we do to encourage more of that in the future? So that is something that is very important to achieving the outcome you're describing. Is we want new energy consumption to be clean electricity, not using other unabated fossil fuels. And some of it is happening, but we don't really have a plan outside of the utility that helps us understand and intentionally take those actions yet. So we do need help from the Climate Action Plan at the City of Omaha and the state in order to achieve the outcome you're talking about. And with that, we got to wrap it up because there's another presentation. Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeremy and Eric, for a really informative program. I want to remind you, there is a reception down by the ballroom from 4:30 to 5:30, and I think they're serving hors d'oeuvres. And then After that, we'll have a panel discussion in the ballroom and a movie showing. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And especially thank you to our speakers.
Thanks so much again.
Lincoln's also in business.